Hi class, this is JilMac, and I'm going to be going over assignment 9, chapter 14. So in the last video I showed you how to create a link. When you're opening a link, have it open in a new page. And so I'm going to go down to chapter 14, and these are the examples from the book. I've already gone over the first example, so let's go over the example that shows drop shadow. So here's the next one. So adding drop shadow starts on page 368. If we look at the CSS first, we can see that we have our basic body, which is going to give us a background and a background color. We have a paragraph, which is going to have a color, which is almost black, and a font size, and that is going to be bold, and there's going to be a margin. That we're going to have some children in our paragraph, and that we're starting to use the dot syntax where we're breaking up the paragraph into basic and basic negative and blur inversed and down to multiple, and here we have the text shadow. So we're starting to break down what's in our paragraph. Let's go back to our textbook, and let's look at this text shadow. So when we look in here, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so we can see all the different choices, and we have the 5 choices, the same as is laid out on page 369. Let's go into our tools and our developer tools in Google, and let's just move this out a little bit. And here we are looking at, let's go into the elements so that we're looking at the basic page. We're going to open the header and see that we are going into our directory CSS and looking for textshadow.css. So you have to make sure that when you FTP this to the server, you're putting it in the CSS directory and that the name of it is textshadow. We are using a script, and we're using a Chrome extension to help us do this in JavaScript. And in our body we have all of the different paragraphs, and basically as I curse over the basic, you're going to see, and let me make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so as I curse over basic, you're going to see that there's the box, kind of, it shows you the box here and what all the different colors look like. This is the basic box, then you have the green, then you have the orange. You can't really see that in this example. But as I cursor over each one of these, it tells me this is the blur, and this is what the blur looks like. And you can start to see that blur a little bit. And blur inverse is what they call blur radius. And multiple text shadows gives us that one. So these are the names of the paragraph. The paragraph has a class, and that class basic pulls up some things in our CSS. So let me make this a little bit smaller so we can see them. Okay, now I'm going to go into our sources, and in our sources I'm going to look at the CSS. I'm going to open the CSS. Let's open this up, and let's open this CSS that we looked at. I'm going to close this window a little bit. So as we get into the background's just white. If we wanted to, we could change the background to pink. And now our background would be pink. Sometimes you can see the blur a little bit better with a color than with just black. Now our paragraph, our font size is 4. Here, if we wanted it to be 6, it would make it a little bit bigger. But after I went through all of that, that's nothing. So 4.5 is what it was, and I'll put it back to that. So then we get into our paragraphs. And our paragraphs are starting to get into our dot. So here's basic. So the basic is going to be a text shadow. So you can see it a little bit. This is our x-axis. So our x-axis, if I want to change this from a 3 to a 10, we're going to see the x-axis brings us to the right. So now our shadow is longer here on this W. Our shadow is longer. Suppose we made it, instead of a 10, a 20. You know, you probably wondered, why did you need to know the XY axis in math? Well, it's so that we can do things with computers. If I wanted to, I could make this 30, and it's really going to go to the right because our XY axis goes there. But, oh, that was 300. So let's just delete one of those. So that's 30. Now, if I make this 20 here, it's now going to be really down because our y-axis goes up and down. And if I wanted to, I could make this 50. You know, it would drag it all the way down here when it's supposed to be way up here. Oop, that was 500, so let's just change. Let's remove that. So our shadow is over to the right 30 pixels and down 50 pixels. So if I move this to 10 again, then you can see that basic drop shadow. Now our negative shadow goes in the opposite direction. See this negative? Here we have a -4, but suppose we made this a -10. So that's going to move it to the left. And we don't even really see it that well. So let's just change that to a -5. And now you can see it a little bit, but the color, this color is very gray. Suppose I wanted it to be orange. So that oops, you have to spell it right though, otherwise it doesn't know what color it is. So now you can see that that shadow is orange, or maybe I could make that shadow green. And so now you get that green shadow. And now if we do it let's do this one a -20. So that, but the -20 brings it above. So it gives you your different choices. Now let's go to this blur one, which is right here. This is the blur. Now that blur is only a 10. If I change this blur to be a 20, can we see it a little bit better? And suppose instead of gray, I wanted it to be red. So now our blur is a little bit of red. Suppose instead of red, I wanted to make it purple. So now we have that radius purple. And if I didn't want it to be 20, suppose I wanted it to be 40. Now you're starting to get, you know, it's not that big, it kind of disperses. Suppose instead of 2, I had a 10 here. So now it's kind of moved to the right a little bit, 10. Let's move it to the right, maybe 40. So now you can really see there's hardly any blur around that B because I've moved it 40 pixels to the right. And if I moved it 20 pixels up and down, now this radius changes to really look like a shadow. And the blur inversed gives you this color as white, but if we wanted to, we could change it to red. So now it kind of fills it with red, but the outside here is black. We could change that. Well, that's the drop shadow, is the text shadow is black. We could change it to green, and now you kind of get a little bit of a green, but if we wanted this to be more, we could change it to 20. Now you can really see that green. So here we have this example, and just remember that the first number is the x-axis, if I can spell, and the x-axis goes across. Then the second number is the y-axis. So the second one is, and that one goes up and down. So if we wanted to, we could, we'll use our pipe. And that one goes up and down. What can I use? An A maybe, capital A. That goes up and down. And the third number is how far it disperses the, I'm going to say the shadow disperses. And you can see those on your tips on page 369. 369, it's always talking about the X offset or the Y offset, which is what I just think of as the X-axis. That if you want the shadow to be on the left-hand side, then you would use negative. So this would be a negative number. If you wanted it to be on the right-hand side, you'd use a positive number. Move those over a little bit. And this is how far it disperses. And if you wanted to, so with the y-axis we're going up and down, north and south. And if you want it to go north, which is how it defaults to, well, it defaults to going south. So if we do nothing, if this one in the blur inversed, or in the blur itself, not the blur itself, let's go up a little bit. In this is 30 and 10. Here, if I wanted it to be 20, oops, that moves it way off the screen. So let's delete that. Move it back to 10. 10 is going to move it down. So this is what will be positive. And if we want it to be negative, it's going to move the shadow above it. So you can play with that a little bit, have some fun filling in what colors that you're going to have things. And it's just a kind of fun exercise on page 369. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.